Hello, hi, Mozit. Good,
Hi.
good to have you here. Finally, I think we've been trying for a bit, but it's wonderful that you could make it today. And thank you. How are you?
I'm good. It's a pleasure to be here. I've never done any recording sessions like this before, but it is fun, and I hope it is going to be fun. And yeah, get to know me a bit about me. So yeah,
Right. So why not let's start with that? Who are you?
I am Muzid. I was born and raised in Eritrea. And then I had to move to Cairo, Egypt to get to Canada. So,
Hmm.
to talk a bit about my history, like migration, I would say for me, migration was more like a straight path. And the reason I would say is really a straight path, sorry, not a straight path. And the reason is because my journey has been marked with like resilience, sacrifice, and unexpected turns.
Hmm.
Each place I lived, whether it's in Eritrea and then Egypt and now in Canada, have shaped me who I am and how I see or how I perceive the world, I would say.
Right. Hmm.
Um, so starting from Eritrea and the reason why I left, I wouldn't go into deep details of why I left, but I would just probably give you like just a context of what Eritrea is, right?
Right.
So we all know that Eritrea is a small country, which is rich in history. So to talk about a bit about history, like we were colonized by Italian. There was an Italian colonization roughly between like 1819s, I would say, and then there was the British, right, after Italian, and then came with the Ethiopians.
Hmm.
And at the Ethiopians colonization, I would say it was more like a very intense because that was for like 30 years. And
Wow.
I felt like I didn't feel, well, I wasn't born by that time, but seeing through my mom, like through storytelling and what my mom was been telling me all these years that she had her brother who she lost during the war as well. So every time I would see her and she would remember about the Independence Day, she would always tear up. So it kind of tells me that it was a very intense war.
Hmm.
And both the nations have lost a huge amount of population from both the side. So after that, we got our independence in the 90s, 1991. But also Eritrea, I would say it's a place where freedom, especially like religious and political ones, are very like tightly controlled.
Right.
And I do not want to talk more about that,
Yeah.
but it is a place where that is tightly controlled.
Right.
So after like the political area, like where we have like like 16, 17 years old, I would say they would have to join for military, and I'm sure you're aware of that. So after this decision that was made, like this whole situation is there. So I made the difficult decision to leave,
Hmm.
and that's when I went to Cairo, Egypt. I was obviously like 18-ish, 17 to 18, so you had to flee at that time.
Yeah.
um, and thinking about like fleeing to Cairo with a group of people and me being as a like female, it's a bit hard when you're like, now when I think about it and like, oh, like this is the person I have become because of this, because it's just that when you do things on your own, you kind of realize, your resilience at the
Right.
end. So get back to Cairo. So it's a city that have become like a temporary refuge for many Eritreans, and
Right.
I'm sure you know that Cairo and Sudan are like the hub for not hosting, for keeping refugees, I would say,
Right.
for seeking safety and opportunity.
Hmm.
So then I had to go to Cairo. So once I was in Cairo, I believe I was like probably like 19 turning to 20. So I was really young. So now living in Cairo was not easy. Like, as I said, I was by myself, and obviously the people that I came with had to kind of like separate in their own way. And as an immigrant, I had no clear path to citizenship or permanent residency. However, I found that working as a teacher, which was not like, obviously it wasn't like a professional, but just like volunteering and teaching English to young refugee adults in the camp.
Yeah.
Many of them who have fled war and political unrest in their own countries as well. So I met people like from Syria, from what other countries there are that I could think of, Yemen, right? Yemenis and all that. So that's where I was teaching in that camp. So many students, when they would tell me their stories, it kind of mirrored my own. And I knew that they were searching for a new beginning, but the road was uncertain for them as well. So that's where I kind of connected more with these kids. And I wouldn't say kids because they were adults too. So I was like a young girl, 21, and teaching like adults who are like 30s and 40s with their children, and they're in this camp. They're, waiting for approval that they could start a new chapter, right? So life in Cairo has taught me resilience. It has taught me to live by myself and how to cope with those situations, like being by yourself specifically, like you have no help and no one that you can rely on help, especially I would say it taught me resilience. I don't want to bring all the emotions, but it did teach me to be a very tough person and the person that I am today.
Right.
So despite the hardships, I found, like I said, purpose in teaching and working in the community in the refugee camp. I volunteered with like educational programs, and I helped students to prepare them for a brighter future and develop a deeper understanding of what it means to be displaced, as I myself was in a different country. So till now, I would say Cairo is a second home, although like Eritrea is my first home, but I would say it is a second home because of meeting those people and how I felt I was at home, even though I wasn't at home. So I would more quote it as home away from home, right?
Yeah.
It is where I found my community, my purpose, and a new sense of resilience in the face of uncertainty.
Right. And when you wanted to leave, when you made that decision, you left alone, from what I'm gathering.
Yeah.
How was that for you, like at that very young age, leaving your family behind?
Well, at first, I did feel alone. And I knew that I wouldn't call like, hey, like, I need help. And then, your parents or your sister would show up the next day, right? Because you are in a different country and you need to learn how to survive, learn all those survival skills, I would say. Like, it's not like it's not like an opportunity, but it's like you have to. It's like a mandatory thing. I would say it's not a choice, right? You have to. So it was hard. There was times that I kind of like had mental breakdowns, but it's not like here, oh, you have a mental breakdown, oh, you have some assistance. Like, it's not like that. You have to face it, right? If you don't, it's like it's you and your life, basically. It's kind of like a debt. What is that word called? Like a debt, and there's a word for it. It's like you have to deal with it. So I had to toughen up and forget my emotions, forget everything, just put it behind back and just be like, keep moving forward. It was that kind of situation for me.
Yeah, so it had to be done.
Yes.
Yeah.
In order to move forward.
Yeah, and so you were in Egypt, and I know you made mention of the interest you had in teaching English.
Yeah.
Was it something you came with from Eritrea, or something you felt, a talent you could offer to others in Egypt?
Well, even in Eritrea, I was also tutoring. So I felt like every place I go, besides here that we are right now, because it's all like more like paper-wise and everything, right? It's just teaching kind of like always was by my side. Like I would say it's more like along the way. So, and it's not like it was just easy. It's just, I think it was just I have a passion for it. So it was one of the, I guess, easiest job that I could do at that moment. And even though it's still like, even teaching in a refugee camp, it's not as easy because you need to be diverse and you need to understand people's problem, right? And you could kind of sympathize and kind of relate with them. It's not like, here's a lesson and whatever, and you're done. It's more like community building, even though they were telling me stories and we kind of created a family and a community. So it's not as easy as it's said, is what I would say.
Then you moved to Canada.
Yes, this is. I moved to Canada, and I don't want to say I never felt at home, but it kind of was. In that case, I would kind of phrase it that way. It's just, I don't know. It's just going through all the struggles and coming here and feeling like an outsider. I don't know if it's the people that make you feel an outsider, or is it just um, or is it because you don't belong to a community, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I moved to Canada the first time, it was in Winnipeg. And I remember that I was at the airport. This was in Calgary, maybe Toronto, but does it matter? But anyway, I was at the airport, and one of the ladies there was like, she was even making an announcement to her colleagues that this person is moving to Winnipeg. He's flying to Winnipeg, or Winterpeg rather. She said, I remember, he's flying to Winterpeg. You are just, for the first time you're going to a place, you want to make sure that you're going to the right place. And
Yes.
she kept saying Winterpeg. I was like, no, I'm going to Winnipeg. Uh, she was like, no, you're going to Winterpeg. And so she asked her colleagues, does anyone have any advice for this guy? He's going to, Winterpeg. And they're like, oh, geez, somebody said I was there in 1975. And, it's the coldest place in the world. And, I thought that these people were really exaggerating. And I arrived, it was, I think that day, minus 20 something. It was in December. And I
Yeah,
was stepping out of the airport, and I asked myself this question, what am I doing here? At that
exactly.
level of the winter, right? What am I doing here? I haven't even stepped out of the airport. So that
I
was,
think I think also to add that, I mean, like being in Cairo and also being in Eritrea. I know Eritrea, like it's like everyone is Eritrean, right? And everybody knows each other. It's a small country, right? And the city that I was living in, Asmar, it was also a very small city. But even in Cairo, I think it's just the way I would more could say it is the hospitality, like how people are. And when I came here, it was not that cold. It was March, but still, like it's just that sense of belonging. Like when I moved to a different country in Cairo, I still felt like I belonged, right?
Mhm.
And till today, I still have that issue here. Even being here for 6 years, I don't know why I keep feeling that. Is it because I didn't accept it in my mind? I have accepted it in my heart, but not my mind. It's just kind of like your conflict with yourself, your
Mm,
internal self, every time.
mm,
So
mm.
I'm not sure if you felt that, but
Yeah, well, you mentioned that Eritrea, your first home, Egypt, your second home. You haven't necessarily said anything about Canada being your third home. And I wanted also, and I will answer your question about whether I feel that that sense of belonging here. And I will tell you for sure that I have lived in a few places, and I think that I carry part of those places in me. And sometimes I feel a sense of belonging to those places in hindsight after I had left, and then reflecting on my experiences there, and I have this nostalgia. And then you go back there again, and you don't feel that you belong. You feel that the place had moved on without you, the people had moved on without you, and you're trying to relearn, some of the things that you used to know, and also learn the new things, the culture and what have you. So I think that has been my experience also in Canada since I came. I've only lived in two places. I've traveled a few places here, but I've lived in Winnipeg and in Thunder Bay in Ontario. In Winnipeg, it was, like I said, difficult with the weather to begin with, and I came from Tokyo to Winnipeg. Uh,
wow,
yeah, and
that's
yeah, in Tokyo, I came directly. I was looking up like this. I mean, in terms of buildings, right? You can imagine. And then in Winnipeg, everything was kind of flat, right? And environmentally, I couldn't really connect immediately. I couldn't connect. And in
yeah,
Tokyo also because I felt we had almost like um, we were quite few, and by the we I mean the African community.
yes,
And so it was so easy to see someone along the way and go, hey, my brother, my sister, and exchange pleasantries. I brought
right,
the same, tendency to Canada, and it didn't work because then
exactly.
yeah, people were used to, yeah, I have seen, your type before. So why are you saying hi to me for? I mean, a few people would nod and
Yeah.
it's but
And bringing that up to the Black History Month, which I will explain that a bit, but that you mentioned home. For me, like I would say, home is not a place. I think I would want to add to that. And it's just an accumulation of experiences. As you said, that you've moved to places, right? So it's experiences, relationships, memories that it forms a deeper sense of belonging. That's what I believe in. And that's what kind of made sense to me. Like, even though if I have like so many families here, like far families, I just don't still feel at home.
mm,
So for me, home has been a journey, one
mm,
that spans continents, cultures, shaped by places I've lived and the people I've met along the way. And it's always the experiences and the people that create those memories,
mm,
give you like very meaningful memories of the place, of the
mm,
country, right?
mm.
I don't know, maybe mine has not come yet,
Yeah.
or maybe I'm meeting someone along the way, like you yourself, right? And other people. Maybe I haven't met those right people, and that's what I keep feeling that inside my heart. I mean, my heart, I feel like I'm home, but not my mind, right?
Mm,
So, speaking of that, when you're talking about your brothers and when you mentioned about the brothers, so I like what I felt is being Black, right? So what it means to be Black. I did not know what it meant to be until I moved here.
mm,
And that's through like signing papers, my immigration document. Like I didn't even know I mean, it's not like I didn't know the word exists, but it's just that you don't use it until you went through it. You know what I mean?
right.
If that makes sense. So I had to learn it through the hard way, like signing immigration papers, official documents. Even till today that I'm signing, there's always that category of being Black. And I
Mm,
really didn't understand what it meant. Um, like, obviously, in my mind, I'm thinking, like, oh no, like I belong to a community. Like, I have a community, I have this, I am Eritrean and I'm identified as Eritrean. But in those kind of category, that's not there as a check.
right.
As a checklist, right? So I felt offended many times. And even when I look at myself, like, I'm not saying I'm too Black or anything, but it's just not being identified is what makes it harder,
Mm, mm,
right?
mm.
And it makes it feel like you're more like cultureless and ruthless, I would say.
Wow. Wow.
If that makes
And you didn't feel that way at all in Egypt.
no.
And
No, never. And that's what I'm saying. Like even till today, the fact that I'm feeling this, it's really insane. But I've never that's what I'm saying. Like even though Egypt was not my home, although I speak Arabic, I don't know nobody there. Like I had zero families, but it's like I felt like I was Egyptian at some point.
what
Even I would try to
what
mimic
helped you to
their
feel that
accent.
way? What helped you to feel that way?
It's the people around you, and like how you mentioned how having your brothers and your sisters, right? Even though you're Black or another culture, but in Egypt, I felt like everyone was the same.
Mm,
I wouldn't say there was racism or anything, but I would say that everyone was the same, as in like everyone you meet on the street will say hi and acknowledge you, even though you were from a different race.
if
And
I was to live in Egypt with you around the same time, would you
yeah,
say that I will be treated the same way as you?
yes,
Okay. And you know where I'm getting at.
yeah. I don't know. What about your experience? How would you say like when you moved here? Did
So
you
when
feel the same? What I'm saying about culture less and not being identified and always being identified as Black, because that is a very controversial topic, right? In today's society, the Black History Month.
right, it truly is a controversial topic, and I've had this conversation with a few people who do not have any qualms identifying as, Black, because a lot of them they grew up here. They share in the collective unconscious of being a Black person, the history of colonization, the history of slavery, and the Blacks who moved the Underground Railroad to Canada, settled here. So it means something here, and I respect that. And in fact, there are people also saying it probably also means something in part of Africa, that in fact, in so many of our cultures, we have terminologies for Black. And Black was truly an important aspect of our identity. But I belong to a different school that doesn't connect identity to skin color. And
Yeah.
part of the reason is that growing up as, more a darker skinned person compared to some of my colleagues, like I would get vitriolic attacks from people who had qualms, issues with my color. And I thought it was an obnoxious existential flaw that I was carrying. So you can imagine for someone like me, I would have certainly this repulsive attitude towards the word Black. And I was given names, right? Sometimes my name, Black, would be appended to my name, not because of my race or anything, but because of, the color of my skin. So that was the issue I had with it. And I now understand the North American history of the word itself and what it means here for the community that calls themselves Black. But for me, coming from a group in Nigeria, in Kaduna State, that has a name, I prefer that people also get to know about that group. Black
I
doesn't
totally agree.
begin to do justice to who I am. Like I'm buying into, it's not entirely detached from me, because the history of slavery is also my history, right? But it's not entirely my history. It's also not the only part of who I am. So what I see, the danger I see is the danger of what we call the single story, that once you are labeled a Black person and that is all that matters, people can now say whatever they think, could be said about who a Black person is. So I struggle with the word as well. I struggle with identity because of these different reasons. But in terms of my homemaking around it, like I try best I can to let people know about my group, to let people know about my village, to travel every year whenever I can to where I came from, even if I also feel that nervousness of belonging there. But to travel there at least to connect, because sometimes I feel the land, beckons, and I go for some sort of nourishment and come back. But also I believe that home, and that is why maybe we have this concept of homemaking, that home is also something we could cultivate. How do you think you have, despite all the, I wouldn't say obstacles to your homemaking, but despite all the challenges around you, how have you tried to take, what they say, that your pride of place?
I would say, like, right now, I try to make. I'm like kind of terrified of making friends at some point, because I don't know. It's just, there's always that mentality, like you're an outcast, you're an outsider, and maybe those are just my intrusive thoughts, I would say. But even though it's just the mentality don't click, right? So even though if I made friends who are born and raised here, I just never tend to be like their long-term friend. And I've tried that so many times. So, and right now I try to make friends who are immigrants, right? And then I'm not trying to be, biased or anything. I think it's just you share the culture, you share the experience,
Right.
you share the struggle. So it's easier to communicate and it's easier to understand each other, sympathize. So that is what I'm doing right now. And even meeting you have also made my life much more easier too, right? It's like, oh, there's someone that actually understands. It's not me that I feel this way. There are people who feel that way. You just need to keep finding those people, right?